We're joined now by Independent Senator Angus King of Maine and Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Thank you both so much for being with us together. And you are part of a new bipartisan effort for Supreme Court ethics reform, which we'll get to in just a minute. But first, I want to hear from you both on the debt ceiling. Senator Murkowski, you say there needs to be discussions between President Biden and Speaker McCarthy. But discussions about what exactly? Cuts in exchange for raising the debt ceiling, a quid pro quo?
Well, I think we've seen that the House has advanced a proposal. It passed. I think the president needs to take a look at that. Keep in mind, it hasn't even been 24 hours since this measure has moved through. So let's not declare this dead. What has to happen are conversations, discussions between the speaker and the president, and real discussions, not discussions that are held through the media right now. The two of them need to sit down. They need to talk about how we're going to move forward, because I hope that everyone agrees that this country cannot default on our debt, period.
And Senator King, I'll ask you the same question. Discussions about what? Because you say there shouldn't have to be a quid pro quo. The debt ceiling should be raised as a matter of course.
Well, there should be discussions, but they should be in the context of the budget negotiations. That's what really this is all about. The debt ceiling should not be used as leverage and threaten the really a catastrophic problem for our entire economy. The debt ceiling was raised 3 times during the Trump administration without a great deal of excitement, and we ought to do it again. This isn't about one of the leaders in the House yesterday said, we're not going to give Joe Biden a blank check. That's a misstatement of what this is all about. This is not about future spending. This is about whether we pay bills we've already incurred. At the end of the month, you don't balance your checkbook by tearing up your credit card bill, you pay it. And to not do that would just, as I say, be catastrophic. So, yeah, we need discussions, but that's what budget negotiations are all about. And let's have those discussions, but not in the context of threatening a financial catastrophe on this country and indeed a lot of the world.
Senator Murkowski, just very quickly, I saw you nodding when Senator King said this shouldn't be an argument about giving President Biden a blank check. What were you nodding about?
It's not about a blank check. And again, when the rhetoric gets amped up, it's hard to focus on what are we trying to accomplish here. So let's cool some of that down. Let's have the conversation. We have to say what we have to say in public, unfortunately. But the reality is these discussions must go on. They need to be at the highest level, and they need to be sooner than later. This X date, whatever that date may be, it's our reality. To Senator King's point, we have obligations that we have to pay up on. So how we do that without avoiding any kind of catastrophe here, this is the hard job of leadership, quite honestly.
Senator King, I want to ask you about this bipartisan Supreme Court ethics reform measure that you are introducing together. Now, this would call for the Supreme Court within a year to write its own code of conduct. It would call on the Supreme Court to name an individual to handle complaints for code violations, and it would give the Supreme Court authority to initiate investigations if a justice violated that code. You say, Senator King, you want to help the Supreme Court help itself, but didn't the court just tell us it doesn't want to help itself? Didn't Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice, just send a letter that all 9 judges there signed saying, we've got this, we don't need to change anything?
Yeah, and the letter was really, I think, just didn't meet the moment. I don't understand why the Chief Justice is resisting this. As you characterized it, our bill, very accurately. It's a 3-page bill. It's very simple. We're not prescribing what the rules should be for the Supreme Court. We're just saying, have some rules and tell us what they are. And by the way, there's nothing radical about this idea. Every judge in the country except the 9 justices of the Supreme Court are subject to the canons of judicial ethics. They got it. In our bill, we say they have a year to put this together. They could probably do it in a weekend, because all they have to do is take the federal canons of judicial ethics, which are already in place for every federal judge in the country, and apply them to the Supreme Court. I am trying, my motivation, and I think Senator Murkowski is, we're trying to help the Supreme Court to rebuild public confidence in it as an institution. And like I say, we're trying to help them help themselves, and this is really an institutional move to shore up public confidence. Otherwise, this is going to continue to fester.
Senator Murkowski, what specifically needs to change, or what would change with your legislation? For instance, Justice Clarence Thomas, would he be allowed to accept the gifts that he accepted without disclosing them like he did?
Again, to Senator King's point, our legislation does not prescribe what that code of conduct should look like. We provide that to the Supreme Court to make that determination, and that's why, in my view, it's relatively benign in terms of how the legislative branch reaches into the judicial branch to tell them what to do. We're not doing that. What we are trying to do here, though, is to help rebuild, I think, some of the credibility gap, the integrity gap that we're starting to see right now, when our institutions are not viewed as fair, as transparent. Even if you are the 9 black-robed justices sitting on the highest court of the land, people want to know that there are protocols, that there are rules, that there are standards, and that there is a level of transparency there, so that they can basically count on that. So again, this is not radical legislation. This allows the court to determine what their code of conduct will be. It will be available for all to see, but why push back on this and say, no, what we have in place is good enough now? I think if you ask the American public if they think that some of what they have seen of late is okay, they would say no. And they would further go to the point that they thought that the Supreme Court also had a judicial code of conduct, as does every other level of the judiciary in this country, as does the executive branch, as does the legislative branch. So I think what we're doing is just bringing the Supreme Court to where most Americans expected they were, with the judicial code of conduct.
And you're doing it together. It's great to have both of you, Senator Murkowski, Senator King, together. Welcome to CNN News Central from the 2 northern corners of America. Appreciate it, both.